From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Here's what's ahead. K-State's Dan O'Brien recapping yesterday's USDA grain supply and demand report, which included the updated estimates on U.S. row crop production. He'll talk about the short-term market response to those numbers, coupled with the outlook for a dry fall and the market implications there. Then K-State's Jane Lingenfelser will review the just-posted results from K-State's 2021 Wheat Variety Performance Test Report. She'll cite the varieties that stood out at each of the 22 locations and tells how the 5 most widely planted varieties fared in this year's field trials. Standing by also to talk Kansas agricultural weather, K-State's Mary Knapp. All that here on Agriculture Today. You are tuned in to Agriculture Today. Thanks for being along once more as the centerpiece for this week's grain market commentary is that eagerly anticipated USDA World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates report, focusing on the crop production numbers from that report out yesterday morning. Dan O'Brien is standing by to hash through what those numbers are saying to the markets. He's a grain market economist with K-State Research and Extension. We'll go crop by crop here, Dan, as we work through these. And the corn yield number was scaled back considerably, and that caught the market's attention right away.
Yes, the key points in the corn market kind of tell themselves. When the news came out that the USDA had projected corn yields for 2021 at 174.6 bushels per acre, rather than something along the lines of 177, 179. We had some 180 pluses coming in as a pre-report expectations in this report. When they came in with that and also projected the size of this year's crop at 14.75 billion bushels, down over 415 million from the earlier July estimate. Well, that was a big deal, and it's a really big deal. So by the time that change in the size of the crop worked its way through the U.S. balance sheet, basically I think we saw where the USDA is going to go if we get any shorter in terms of the usage side for their estimates, if we cut back the size of this 2021 corn crop anymore in the September 10th and in successive crop production reports. And basically they left ethanol production unchanged, but cut back feed usage by 100 million bushels and shaved back exports by 100 million bushels also. So that inelastic demand from the renewable fuel standard on the ethanol side tied in with decent economic activity in the U.S., tending to hold up ethanol production. And as long as that inelastic demand stays in, then as corn prices move higher, then you're seeing the exports and feed usage thought to be where you see rationing occur. We ended up with the USDA projecting 1.424, basically 1.25 billion bushels of corn carryout, stocks to use at 8.5%. They did raise their projection for corn prices in the coming year to 575. Now, what's interesting, I hear we sit in Kansas and we see what the USDA's projected for the 2021 average corn price. And we look at some of these new crop bids that we have right in front of us. New crop bid in Colby yesterday after the report, after the markets closed, 561, Salina 563, Topeka 547, Garden City, Demand Center, et cetera, 588, Hutchinson 573, Columbus 553. So the USDA is projecting 575, and our new crop bids at harvest are really that or below, except in Garden City, where we'd have in most cases, have the strongest price. So it is as it is. Interesting, as you look at the particulars on the export side, the USDA did shave back both this current marketing year exports, which will end, this marketing year will be done on August 31st, and then September 1 to start the new one, shave that back by 75 million bushels. And also, again, as we'd already talked about, the projection for this coming year by 100 also. So, what I thought was really interesting, I talked about this before we went on air, was that when these numbers first came out, we saw corn futures jump. Closed yesterday at 567. but it traded as high as 589.5. So I guess this was a shock to the market, but then as people thought about it, et cetera, they probably realized there's more information to be dealt with, more time to go through. One question I have is with the heat we've had, even in the central Corn Belt, I wonder about ear fill from pollination issues that from all the challenging weather we had coming through that last part of July. Of course, now we're in August and we've got some heat at different places, but put a map in the supporting information that goes to this radio broadcast showing that in terms of U.S. corn production, 35% of U.S. corn production is in areas that are affected to some degree by drought. So I think that's the issue. If you're sitting in Illinois or Indiana or Ohio and wondering about where the corn crop's going, well, it looks awfully good. But the balance that the USDA did, and I applaud them for it. We don't always applaud the USDA for what they're doing, but on this, they probably went state by state, saw what they had, brought it all back together in aggregate, and the 174.6, basically 175 is where the average came out at.
Soybeans now, maybe not as intriguing as the corn numbers were, but there was a notable drop, Dan, in domestic production, although the per acre yield was kept static.
Yes, I thought what was interesting out of that whole thing, after dropping the size of the U.S. soybean crop by 66 million bushels down to 4.339 billion, and shaving basically instead of 50.8 bushels per acre down to 50. They made changes in the balance sheet, et cetera, but kept the bottom line ending stocks unchanged. So, look, I've dealt with supply-demand balance sheets. I put a few together myself. I know what's going on. Hey, I'm not going to move off that ending stocks figure until I've got. So they stayed at 155 and adjusted the use to make it fit. And so that tells me that, hey, we're in August when so much is happening on soybeans. So let's get to September and October, and we'll have a better feel for what the size of that crop is. That they acknowledge that, hey, there's some damage in those areas. When you look at soybeans, 30% of U.S. soybean production is dealing with drought. You know, I see that, and that 30%, if it's hammered pretty good, then how much better are you going to have the rest of the country to still make 50 bushel per acre? So I guess I'm enslaved to old ad hoc grain market rules that corn's made in July and soybeans are made in August, and we're still in August. So let's see where this thing goes as you go on.
But as you say, not only the dryness, but this intense heat through a wide swath of the country, actually. Well, that's going to ring, well, bullish for prices anyway.
Speaking of ringing, I mean, I guess economists are known for their hand wringing, you know. So as a hand wringer, I remember some years when the hot temperatures at night snuck up on us and affected crop yields during these summers. And even though we've had some rainfall and some moisture, still there's heat to be dealt with. And I would also say that the August reports for corn and soybeans are at the USDA. It does farmer surveys. They look at satellite imagery, take all the information they can, but they're not out in the field aggressively doing their own enumerated measures. Mm-hmm. That comes in September. So there's more information, a broader, in-depth survey to be done, and it'll represent where the crop's at on September 1. Yeah. So that's really the thing that I'm looking forward to right now.
What was reported then, Dan, on the wheat side? That stocks number was tightened down much more than most thought going in. Maybe that's the headliner.
I think, speaking with sober-mindedness on this topic, we've got ending stocks projected for this marketing year with virtually 99% of the U.S. spring wheat crop in the drought area, right. 100% of the durum crop, all suffering from drought, and saw the USDA lower its projection of U.S. wheat production, total wheat production. Not bad, pretty good, hard red winter, struggling in the white wheat in these other areas, basically in hard red spring durum. They dropped U.S. production by 49 million bushels. In this report, and again, stay tuned. There's more coming. The big report for wheat actually comes at the end of September. So we're ahead of where the real information is coming in the wheat market from the USDA anyway. And they ended up with a number. What I think is an important number is that we have ending stocks projected now at 627 million bushels. And we were at 844. Well, that'd be for the 21-22 marketing year. This last one we just came out of ended May 31st. We were at 844 million. We've been closer to 1 billion in several years prior to that. So we're down to the place where ending stocks to use for wheat is at 30%. Well, we're pretty comfortable at 40, 45. We've been around 50 for a good while. Well, we're sitting here at 30. We're still wondering what we're going to end up and have out of those northern areas. So just interesting as all get out to see. I would say, kind of a surprise in the midst of all this, we had the best hard red winter wheat export week we've had for a good while. 10.5 million bushels exported the week ending August the 5th. We really need to get the people from grain science in to talk about how people that make flour can handle more abundant 10.5 to 11% protein hard red winter wheat with tight supplies and some of it damaged of spring wheat at higher protein, and still end up and make the products that they need for flour for the baking industry. That's really where this is at right now. It's an issue of how the millers can take this mixed bag of what we've got down here in our hard red winter wheat area and what they have up in the spring wheat area that's damaged, although high protein, but in the overall quality measure of that crop, you've got other baking characteristics to consider. So anyway, we were wondering about wheat feeding all through the summer as a focus in what was holding up the hard red winter wheat market. Well, now I think that focus has shifted over to the problems we've had in spring wheat and what we have to do to make sure we have quality baking products to meet consumer demand here in the U.S.
As always, Dan, much obliged for your comments.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.
He is K-State Research and Extension grain market economist Dan O'Brien, along with us from his office in Colby, Northwest Kansas, and you're listening to Agriculture Today. We're back now on Agriculture Today, and for the next few minutes, it's all about wheat variety performance. For K-State's Department of Agronomy has just wrapped up collecting the data on the 2021 wheat variety performance tests around the state of Kansas. And the one who puts that report together is with us now. Jane Lingenfelser is here to share some of the highlights from this year's wheat performance trials. And this will all be captured. We might start on this, Jane, in the forthcoming wheat seed book available to producers.
Yes, it will be available, as usual, as an insert in the High Plains Journal magazine. And the book contains the results of the wheat performance tests and also the directory of certified seed dealers from the Kansas Crop Improvement Association. Now, our individual location results are already available on our website. That address is agronomy.ksu.edu. And an electronic version of the wheat book can be found at the K-State Research and Extension Library. That address is ksre.ksu.edu/bookstore. And this version does not have the certified seed directory, but that can be found at the KCIA website. That address is kscrop.org.
As we go along, we'll remind folks of all of those sources of information. Wheat growers around the state eagerly anticipate the data from your tests around Kansas. And here in 2021, how many locations featured plots?
We had 22 locations organized into 10 regions with different climate and management practices. And this year there were a slate of new locations for the season. So to be aware of when searching for the trial that is closest to your area and management style, I'd point out that all but 4 locations were treated with a fungicide, whether because of weather delays at Ottawa and Parsons or intentionally not treated, such as Wellington.
Let's go point by point through Kansas and talk about those varieties which tended to rise to the top at each of those test locations. And let's begin in the southeast, where rainfall was abundant, but you were able to maintain the test sites.
We were. We had Ottawa in Franklin County and Parsons in Labette County, and the average overall was 40 bushels. I'll point out that Ottawa had over 25 inches of rain from April through harvest. That greatly affected the yields and grain quality. If we had known, we probably would have grown some rice there as well. But the top yielders of wheat in the southeast region were WB 4269 and WB 4401 from Westbred, also Rockstar from Polanski, and Zenda from KWA. And in previous years, those same varieties have done well as AM Cartwright from Agromax have done well in the southeast region.
In addition, you do conduct that soft wheat tests at one location in the southeast.
We did at Parsons in Lebec County. The average for the soft test was 90 bushels. Soft varieties that did well, there was an experimental from Northern Star. EXP 1425 did well. Also AM 503 from Agromax, 726 from Beck's, and 9120 from Dynagro did well in the soft test. And this year we had a whole slew of new varieties, which is wonderful. Don't have much historical yields to go off of, but a few varieties that have done well. Agromax AM 503 and 505 have historically done well in the soft test.
Then to north central Kansas, 2 locations, you say, and good yield averages, it looks.
Yes, we had an average of 78 bushels at Belleville and Beloit in north central Kansas. And our top yielders there, WB 4401 from Westbred, AG Golden from AgSeco, Canvas from Plains Gold, that's Colorado wheat, and Long Branch from Dynagro did well. And in the past, LCS Link from Lima Grain, also Bob Dole from AgriPro, and Rockstar from Polanski have done well in the north central region.
And your central Kansas tests, 3 sites here, well, the yield average there was similar to those of north central Kansas.
It was. Our average across 3 locations was 76 bushels. Those were locations at Ellsworth in Ellsworth County, Hillsborough in Marion County, and Assaria in Saline County. There was quite a significant drop of test weight in this area due to scab. However, our top yielders for the central region were Larry from KWA, Long Branch from Dynagro, Showdown from Oklahoma Genetics, or OGI, Paradise and Rockstar both did well from Polanski, and WB 4401 from Westbred did well. In the past, also Whistler from Plains Gold, WB 4699 from Westbred, and SY Wolverine from AgriPro have done well in the central region.
Well, how about the trials in south central Kansas then? You had 3 sites and once more very sound yield averages.
Absolutely. We had Newton in Harvey County, Hutchinson in Reno County, and St. John in Stafford County. The average for the south central region was 71 bushels. And the varieties that did the best across all locations, WB 4401 from Westbred, the new release from KWA, KS Ahern did well, also Showdown from OGI, and AP 18AX from AgriPro did well. And in the past, WB 4269 from Westbred, also Bob Dole from AgriPro, and AG Radical from AgSeco have done well in the south central region.
Now, you mentioned, Jane, that you did have, on purpose, one site in south central Kansas that you evaluated without the use of fungicide application.
Yes, we had one location in the south central region that was not treated with fungicide on purpose. The average at that location was 59 bushels, and it's not a straight comparison since the St. John site was treated with a fungicide, but the difference between those 2 locations was about 15 bushels, St. John's being 72 bushels and Wellington being 59. So there was an obvious decrease because of the lack of fungicide. Mm-hmm. But the varieties that did well in the non-treated site, Double Stop CL Plus from OGI did well. Also LCS Atomic AX from Lima Grain, AM Cartwright from Agromax, and WB 4401 from Westbred did well in the non-treated situation.
So that might be interesting data that you would want to take a look at, producers, as far as making management decisions. Before we get into the results from western Kansas, you note that this was a year of really good productivity there. So there may be less distinction between varieties because of that?
Absolutely. When everything is doing well, it's very hard to pick out differences among the varieties and to pick out the ones that stand out. But that is a great situation for producers to be in, and no one is complaining but me about that. But at the Northwest region, we had an average of 79 bushels over 4 locations. There were 2 locations, Colby and Tribune, that were affected by a hail and windstorm that did cause some lodging. But overall, we had very good yields. We also had sites at Russell in Russell County and Decatur in Decatur County. And the top performers in the Northwest region, A.G. Golden from Agseco, K.S. Dallas from KWA, WB 4462 from Westbred, and Tatanka from KWA did well in the Northwest region. And historical top yielders, AG Icon has done well in the past. That is from Agseco. Lone Rider from OGI and Canvas from Plains Gold have all done well.
And noting that's a Northwest fallow system that you're working with there.
Yes.
Yeah. Southwest Kansas then?
Southwest, we had 3 locations, Larned in Pawnee County, Hugoton in Stevens County, and Garden City in Finney County. Again, excellent yields for that region. It was an average of 99 bushels. And our top yielders, Whistler and Canvas from Plains Gold, both did well. Also, SY Wolverine from AgriPro. And in the past, the White Wheat Joe from KWA has done well. Also, Long Branch from Dynagro and KS Dallas, also from KWA, have done well in the Southwest region.
And 3 irrigated test sites to cover here.
Yes, we had locations at Garden City in Finney County, Colby in Thomas County, and Hugoton in Stevens County. The average across the irrigated sites was 117 bushels. I'd like to point out that Hugoton and Garden City had 100% of the entries averaged over 100 bushels. And Hugoton, 4 replications of data, none of them yielded under 100 bushels. So very hard to pick out what did best, but I will try. So WB 4595 from Westbred did well. Also LCS Julep from Lima Grain and AM Cartwright from Agrimax. In the past, those that have yielded well have been SY Wolverine and AG Golden from Agseco, and WB 4699 from Westbred have done well in the irrigated sites.
Well, there's a region-by-region look at those wheat varieties, which really rose to the top in the 2021 Wheat Variety Performance Test. Jane Lingenfelser, K-State agronomist, is with us. We'll be back with Jane and with more after these moments away on Agriculture Today. Welcome back to Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, concluding our look at the just-released results from K-State's 2021 Wheat Variety Performance Tests, conducted at 22 locations throughout the state, as outlined earlier by our guest, Jane Lingenfelser. She's the agronomist in charge of K-State's crop performance trials each and every year, and she's here to tell us more about the wheat results. But putting these in a bit of a different context, Jane, the top 5 varieties by acreage planted in the 2021 wheat production season and how they did. Let's go 1 through 5.
All right. So starting with number 1 for the 3rd straight year, SY Monument from AgriPro. Monument accounted for 9.4% of seeded acres in Kansas. And in our test, it did well at St. John in the South Central test and was about at the test average in the Central and North Central tests. Number 2, WB Grainfield from Westbred was not included in the 2020-21 tests. Number 3, Zenda was. It did well at Parsons and Ottawa under those tough, non-treated growing conditions and was above average in the Central region. Number 4, T158, did best at Russell, and it was about or a little bit below test average everywhere else. And Joe from KWA did best at Larned, and it was about or slightly above test average at the Western trials.
Of course, as individual producers, if you would like to know more about how each of those varieties did in those locations closest to you, you can inspect that. If you're planted wheat that isn't included in that top 5, likewise, explore the test results. And Jane, you have also broken down the results by the origins of those varieties from the K-State program, Oklahoma State, Colorado State program, otherwise, and look at it from that angle as well. Talk about the Kansas baselines, if you would.
All right, and these are actually listed in the order of release and not alphabetical, but the oldest one is Everest, which yielded below average everywhere but Ottawa in Franklin County in the southeast region. We also had Oakley CL, which was entered in our Western trials, and it was above the test average in all those trials. Larry had a very good year, and it was above average at, I believe, all the locations it was tested. Tatanka was about at the test average in the Northwest and Southwest trials. KS Silverado did very poorly in the non-treated trial, but it was about at the test average overall across all the other locations. KS Western Star was also knocked back very much at the non-treated trial, but it was slightly better yields than Silverado throughout the rest of the state. KS Dallas did the best at Tribune, and it did better in the Northwest trials than the Southwest. KS Ahern was lower in the central region of the state, but was above average everywhere else. KS Hamilton did the best at Larned in southwest Kansas, and it was slightly better in the southwest trials. And KS Hatchet, it struggled a bit in the central region, but it was above average yielding everywhere else.
So that's how the wheats from the Kansas Wheat Alliance lineup trended here in 2021 at harvest time. Oklahoma-based lines.
From Oklahoma, we had Gallagher. It was slightly below the test average in the south central region. However, it was above average at the non-treated site at Wellington. Double Stop was yielded about the same. Showdown was above average at all locations, and it was mentioned as the top yielder in the central and south central region. Lone Rider was overall about at the test average this year. Smith's Gold was overall slightly below average, the test average this year. Green Hammer, Baker's Ann, Skydance, Uncharted, and Big Country were all entered in the non-treated trial and did very well there. Strad CL Plus, it's a newly released variety from Oklahoma. It struggled a bit at St. John's, but it was decent in the south central region. Breakthrough was slightly below the test average at locations except Garden City Dryland. OK Corral did better in the south central region of the state, and one soft variety, OCWO3SS80S-8WF, an experimental, obviously, struggled a bit at Parsons.
And the Colorado variety lines.
Langen, it did best at Tribune, but overall was about at the test average throughout the state. Whistler did not do well at the non-treated site, but it was above average everywhere else. So obviously the fungicide is quite beneficial when producing Whistler. Bird CL Plus did best at Decatur, and it was a little bit below the test average everywhere else. Canvas did best in the southwest region. I believe it was mentioned as one of the top yielders in the southwest. Breck was entered in the irrigated trial, and it was slightly below the test average there. Monarch was also only entered in the irrigated trial, where it was slightly above average. Crescent AX overall was slightly above the test average, and Guardian also was overall at the test average.
Well, that should give our wheat producers fodder for thought in as far as their variety selections for planting this fall. And it's best, as you've always maintained, Jane, that growers look at the data for themselves, study the options and the traits of each and every one of these varieties entered, and do their homework with the performance test results as part of that.
Absolutely. This was just a very brief overview of the information that is out. Lots of good information can be found in the 2021 Kansas Wheat Variety Performance Test results. As always, be sure to keep your own environmental conditions in mind when examining the test results, and be mindful of your own conditions when selecting a wheat variety. And more information on winter survival, disease, and grain quality is available at www.agronomy.ksu.edu, or as a hard copy, which will be coming out as an insert in High Plains Journal magazine. It can also be found, the performance test version can be found at the KSRE Digital Library. That address is ksre.ksu.edu/bookstore. And the certified seed dealer directory can be found at the KCIA website. That address is kscrop.org.
Great work, as always, Jane. Thanks, and we appreciate you sharing these highlights right here.
Well, thanks for having me.
She's the agronomist in charge of K-State's crop performance trials, and with that overview of the 2021 Kansas Wheat Variety Performance Tests. That's Jane Lingenfelser on Agriculture Today. We'll be back with K-State's Mary Knapp on Kansas agricultural weather here on the K-State Radio Network. Topping off this Agriculture Today, we welcome back in once more from the Weather Data Library here at K-State, Research and Extension climatologist Mary Knapp to tell us about this slow-moving system through Kansas as we speak, Mary, and well-distributed rainfall the last 24 hours, some of the hefty variety.
Right. The rain has been spotty, as we've seen for most of our systems this month, where areas have seen over 4 inches of rain. There are 2 pockets of that, one in the east central area of the state and then another one up in the north central area. But along with those hefty amounts, there have been widespread areas where we've had a half an inch or more. Again, very welcome rains. It may be a little late for the corn producers. They've already had a hit to their yield due to the high temperatures and the dryness of the last week. But again, welcome for those that are getting it. It's just beginning to show up in the southern tier of counties in the state. We're looking at generally a quarter of an inch or less in those areas. So we'll hopefully get more of that today and into tonight.
And the prospects for even more in the days ahead, which we'll talk about. It's been awfully hot up to this change.
Well, it may seem like it's been hot, but believe it or not, the week ending on Tuesday was cooler than normal statewide. The areas that were warmer were the northwest corner of the state and the west central. They typically are a little bit cooler than the rest of the areas, so having these highs in the 90s have tipped them a little bit on the warmer scale. But statewide, our departure from normal was 1/10 of a degree cooler than normal for the week ending again on Tuesday.
And that drought monitor, well, it'll likely shift some when we take a look at it next week. But up till Tuesday, what was it looking like?
Well, basically with the moisture and temperatures that we had ending through Tuesday, we did see some expansion of the moderate drought, particularly in the central areas of the state, a little bit more introduced in the south central, and an expansion of the moderate drought in the northwest. We didn't see much extension of the severe drought, but again, we did see some expansion of the moderate and the abnormally dry conditions, which is certainly not unexpected with the heat and dryness that we had up until this recent storm.
Well, let's just move right into the outlook then, and what likely will happen in the way of precipitation. You have the latest quantity forecast in hand. What's it telling us?
Well, the quantitative precip forecast that was issued this morning is a little bit more encouraging than the one that was issued yesterday. They're calling for a good chance of having an inch or more of rain across most of the state. And that does include that northwest corner, which has missed out on these overnight rains.
That's for next week, right?
That is for next week, for the period from today ending next Friday on the 20th. So, again, it will certainly take it. If we could get that inch, that would be very welcome, particularly for the sorghum and soybean producers who could use that additional moisture to help finish off those crops.
But there will be heavier amounts interspersed there, right?
Yes, again, we're seeing this pattern that there will be some isolated heavier amounts along with the more general rainfall totals. So that's typical with Kansas in the summer.
And accompanying cooler temperatures for an extended time.
Right. That probably will be as beneficial as anything else. We're not talking super cool, but we are talking highs in the mid to upper 80s. So we're looking at 85, 86 for highs, and lows in the mid 60s. And that is, again, very productive temperatures for the crops to continue, and of course very comfortable for the humans and the livestock in the region.
Mary, for the remainder of our time, let's talk La Nina for its center stage once again. And there are numerous reports and maybe some speculation that it could be a dry fall and winter. What's the official word?
Well, the official word is that they're still in a La Nina watch. That means conditions are ripe for development of a La Nina, but it hasn't yet tipped the scale into the La Nina pattern. Again, a La Nina is when you have cooler than normal waters along the equator in the Pacific and accompanying changes in the wind patterns. So we're watching that for its development. As I've mentioned earlier, the later it is on its onset, the less impact it will have on our Kansas fall conditions. So if it doesn't develop until September, it will have less of a negative input than if it had already started and was in play. For us, it typically brings hotter and drier conditions for our fall. Not good if we're trying to finish off our summer planted crops. Not too bad if you're trying to get harvest completed, but certainly not ideal for establishing the winter wheat in the fall. We would not like that hot, dry pattern. So we'll see how that goes. For us in the wintertime, the correlation is not particularly strong. We might have a milder than normal winter, but that has been the pattern for a number of years anyway, regardless of what the Pacific state is like. There are other factors that can have a greater influence, and those include the Madden-Julian oscillation, amongst others. So, again, we'll have to be prepared. Kansas, we're used to having widely changing conditions from season to season and from day to day.
Just for clarification, then, if they're talking La Nina peaking in November, that's not necessarily a bad thing for us?
Not necessarily. Usually for us it means that we have a slightly drier winter, but winter is not our big moisture season, so that's not as much as a negative as it would be, say, in the mountains in the west. It also generally is accompanied by milder temperatures, so we tend not to be quite as cold, don't have as many Arctic outbreaks when there's a La Nina in place.
It'll be watched closely, obviously, and we'll do the same right here. Mary, thanks. Next week, we'll talk again.
Thanks, Eric.
Mary Knapp, climatologist, K-State Research and Extension, along with us each Friday. And thanks for joining us likewise, and please tune back in, if you will, on Monday. Until then, Eric Atkinson bidding you a good weekend for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.